Yes, it's good that the Houthis for the moment have said that they're going to stop shooting at U.S. ships, but we still don't have commercial shipping traffic feeling free to go through the Red Sea. So we still have a lot of work to do to get after all of the instability in the region. I will agree with the chairman that Iran is the primary driving force in that without question. You see their hand everywhere: Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Israel, Iraq. Getting an ability to contain that is crucially important. And I actually think it is good that President Trump is negotiating directly with Iran. Now, my Republican colleagues would pretty much lose their damn minds every time Biden even suggested that he might talk to Iran. So that particular hypocrisy grates a little bit. But it is a good idea to try to have a conversation. I think it is also crucially important in the negotiations that we focus on their support for proxies. It is their support for proxies that is the most destabilizing force in the region. But we also need to work more closely with our Israeli partners. I have an enormous amount of sympathy for the threats that they face from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from Iran, and others, but we need to find an alternative to Hamas. We need to work with Palestinians to give us some sort of future beyond Hamas. Partners in the region, as you well know, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and others are working with those Palestinian partners, trying to generate that and being rebuffed constantly by the Israeli government. This war won't stop until Hamas is gone. I agree with that. But Hamas won't be gone until there is some alternative for the Palestinian people. I think it is really important that we step up pressure to try to push those negotiations and show the Palestinian people that they do have a future. If they don't think they have a future, it's going to be very difficult to stop this conflict. In Africa, I am very concerned about where that is going. The terrorist groups, as I said, seem to be taking hold in a number of countries. Russia has become more and more prominent in the region. They don't seem to be doing a particularly good job of keeping the peace, but they are still very present and have relationships with a number of countries. The path forward to that is not clear to me. I will close with a note of agreement with the chairman. These regions matter. They lead to greater instability. And when we talk about our primary concern being China, we must understand that the challenge with China is global. Any notion that we're going to pivot to Asia and therefore deal with China and just ignore the rest of the world, I think fundamentally misunderstands what is happening. As you gentlemen know, China is very active in Africa. They're very active in the Middle East. Russia is as well. This is a global challenge. These two regions are crucially important. We need to be present, but we also need to work with partners in the region to try to create greater stability in what is a very challenging part of the world. With that, I look forward to the testimony and the questions and answers, and I yield back.
I'd now like to introduce our witnesses. First, we have Ms. Catherine Thompson. She's performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Affairs. General Eric Kurilla is the commander of United States CENTCOM, and General Michael Langley is the commander of United States Africa. Welcome to all of our witnesses. Ms. Thompson, we'll start with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the House Armed Services Committee, thank you for inviting me today to testify on our defense posture and policy in U.S. Central Command and U.S. Africa Command, respectively. It is my honor to appear alongside General Kurilla and General Langley. The Department of Defense is reviewing our posture, activities, and resources across all combatant commands, including CENTCOM and AFRICOM, in line with President Trump's America First priorities to make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. In line with President Trump's Peace Through Strength framework and under Secretary Hegseth's leadership, DoD is putting core American interests first in the CENTCOM and AFRICOM AORs to make America and our citizens more secure. America's core national security interests in the CENTCOM AOR are to 1, prevent and disrupt credible terrorist threats to the U.S. homeland, 2, deny Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and 3, support Israel's ability to defend itself. State and non-state actors across the Middle East, such as ISIS, Iran, and its proxies, continue to threaten the U.S. homeland, as well as our forces and posture across the region. At the direction of the President, the Department of Defense maintains the forces and capabilities to defend against these threats to our national security. President Trump has already demonstrated his unrelenting commitment to keep Americans safe by conducting operations targeting Houthi terrorists in Yemen that successfully restored freedom of navigation and American deterrence. We will continue to work with our regional partners to enable U.S. operations, coordinate on approaches to regional challenges, and expand interoperability to address our shared threats. For example, our Iraqi security force partners now shoulder the majority of operations against ISIS remnants, requiring only a modest U.S. advisory role. In addition, the historic package of $142 billion in defense sales to Saudi Arabia, which Secretary Hegseth signed last month in Riyadh, will help lock in another generation of interoperability and burden sharing with critical regional partners. We will also continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, a model ally for the region, as they defend against threats from every direction. Secretary Hegseth has backed up this commitment with action and has authorized the deployment of a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD missile battery, and its associated U.S. military crew to Israel. In Africa, the most pressing security challenges include potential threats to the U.S. homeland emanating from terrorist activity, as well as China's ambitions to expand its military power projection capabilities via overseas basing, naval access, as well as an ambition to establish dominance over critical mineral resources on the continent that fund their defense supply chains. To address those security issues, DoD has two priorities in the AFRICOM AOR. One is to disrupt, degrade, and deny the activities of Africa-based terrorist groups that have both the capability and intent to strike the U.S. homeland or U.S. personnel and facilities. To this end, U.S. forces stand ready to engage and neutralize terrorists through direct action. At the same time, the department is working with African nations to grow their operational independence and empower them to counter shared threats. At the same time, DoD will work to prevent and counter efforts by China to position its own forces in the AFRICOM AOR in ways that threaten our ability to defend the U.S. homeland and deter Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. We will also work closely with interagency partners to counter Chinese efforts to exclude the United States from critical markets on the continent. DoD's largest force posture location in Africa is Camp Lemanoir in Djibouti, which hosts 3,300 DoD military personnel and civilians that support AFRICOM, CENTCOM, U.S. Special Operations Command, and U.S. Transportation Command operations. This base, along with smaller enduring locations, provides support to contingency operations, episodic military-to-military engagements, and crisis response. To conclude, I want to emphasize the important role of Congress in enabling the Department of Defense to achieve our objectives in the CENTCOM and AFRICOM areas of responsibility. Your support and funding have been and will continue to be critical to advancing peace through strength. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Department of Defense, and we appreciate your continued support to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, and civilians who work every day to make the American people safer and more secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. General Carrillo, you're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm joined today by Command Master Chief Fleet Derek Walters, the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Central Command. Our partners have described the events of the last 20 months as a tectonic shift, an earthquake, one that began on 7 October 2023 and continued to produce aftershocks across the region. We have been at the brink of regional war several times. Conflict was triggered in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the Red Sea, and Yemen. The region held its breath as Iran and Israel traded blows in the first overt state-on-state attacks between these two countries in their history. At the same time, Tehran continued to increase their stockpiles of uranium enriched to 60%, for which there is no civilian purpose, threatening catastrophic ramifications across the region and beyond. Global violent extremists exploited the turmoil wherever possible to sustain their networks and regenerate capability. This included in post-Assad Syria and the porous border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. We saw this threat actualized multiple times throughout 2024 in high-profile attacks overseas and attempted here at home. However, from this disorder emerges opportunity. Iran is in a weaker strategic position now than at any point in the past 40 years, though it maintains significant operational capability. Qasem Soleimani's vision of a Shia crescent from Iran through Iraq and Syria to Lebanon was shattered as the Syrian regime collapsed and Assad fled to Russia. Lebanese Hezbollah was decimated by Israel, including the death of many of their leaders who were implicated in the 1983 Beirut bombing that killed 241 American service members. This dealt a massive blow to Iran's terror network that has targeted and killed U.S. personnel across the region for decades. The Houthis, Iran's new premier proxy threatened the free flow of commerce through a vital waterway and were met with a sustained, deliberate, and focused campaign to reestablish American freedom of navigation. Terrorists are under pressure as CENTCOM's relentless campaign against ISIS removed hundreds of fighters and leaders from the battlefields in Iraq and Syria, to include just 6 hours ago. Our network of partners dealt significant blows to the ISIS Khorasan networks, exploiting the tribal areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan, to include our Pakistani partners bringing the terrorists behind the Abbey Gate bombing to justice. Finally, the reality of aligning with Russia and China was laid bare as our partners across the region, as they watched Russia supporting Assad's atrocities against the Syrian people and the Chinese Communist Party cynically exploit Iran-backed violence in the Red Sea. The United States now stands in a strategic window of opportunity to secure its national interests in the central region, to protect the homeland, secure our economic prosperity, establish freedom of navigation, and prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. CENTCOM's deep military-to-military partnerships have proven a catalyst to these wide-ranging opportunities that now lay before us. Our relationships provide the foundation of the Middle East Air Defense Initiative that defeated hundreds of Iranian munitions and continues to set conditions for the rest of the region's defense. These relationships unleash our shared creative potential in what has become a sandbox of experimentation, enabling us to innovate together, develop rapid solutions to the entire joint force. Our partners are also on the front line. In Iraq and Syria, they remain crucial to the enduring defeat of ISIS, battling the group across their respective countries, as well as enabling the repatriation of ISIS detainees and displaced persons. The warfighters of U.S. Central Command, representing less than 2% of the entire joint force, have been at the forefront of these seismic events over the last year and often on the front lines of conflict. It was those warfighters who sprinted out of their bunkers to fuel, arm, and fly their F-15s through a barrage of missiles and UAVs. It was those warfighters who led the vanguard against maritime terror in the Red Sea, protecting the connective tissue of the global economy. And it was those warfighters who continue to pursue and eliminate the remnants of ISIS wherever they are to stop future attacks as far away from this homeland as possible. It is on their behalf, the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and Guardians who serve this nation on the front lines of freedom that I speak before you today. It is the honor of my professional life to serve as their commander. As I close over 37 years of uniformed service to this nation, I'd offer one final thought. I've spent most of my adult life living, fighting, leading, and building partnerships in the central region. We have traditionally viewed the region as a risk to our national interests, but as I depart, I would offer that there has rarely been a time with greater opportunity to protect those national interests than we have right now, but only if we have the courage to step through that window. Thank you, and I do look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Kurilla. General Langley, you're recognized.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished committee members, it's an honor to appear here today representing the outstanding service members, civilians, and families of the United States Africa Command. As I get closer to the end of my tenure of command, I remain in awe of the character and the capabilities of the men and women willing to serve our nation. Our team of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, guardians, and civilians perform valiantly, and I'm honored and proud to serve with them. America remains in good hands. I'm proud to testify with my friend General Eric Kurilla, the commander of United States Central Command, and my colleague, Ms. Catherine Thompson from OSD Policy. I'd like to extend my gratitude for their steadfast cooperation. Now, ordinarily, I would be joined by my command senior enlisted leader, Sergeant Major Michael Woods. However, as all of our outstanding NCOs do, Sergeant Major Woods has chosen to put himself in the best position to influence operations. Today, he's in Morocco for the African Senior Enlisted Leaders Conference. Now, Morocco is a shining example of a great return on our investment. And their efforts in developing the enlisted corps across the continent is a crucial step in African military professionalism. I recently traveled to Morocco. I attended the African Lion 2025. This exercise is the largest exercise with participation of over 52 nations, 10 NATO allies, and 2 non-NATO allies, and over 10,000 soldiers participating. I also just returned from Kenya, where we jointly hosted the African Chiefs of Defense Conference in Nairobi. This gathering showcased the Kenyan Defense Force's commitment to fostering military dialogue and demonstrated their leadership. The insights drawn from that forum will help inform AFRICOM's approach to hearing how our African partners are solving challenges in their own neighborhoods and understanding where they can shoulder more of the load. Now, everything we do at the United States AFRICOM, especially these types of partnerships, has overarching goal in mind: achieving peace through strength. Now, this requires 3 things: a clear understanding of national security threats, a robust and dependable network of like-minded allies and partners, and appropriate resourcing to match military requirements. Now, as I've said in previous testimony, Africa remains a nexus theater from which the United States cannot afford to shift its gaze. It is home to terrorists who take advantage of conditions in Africa to grow and export their ideology. ISIS controls their global network from Somalia. It is where the Chinese Communist Party actively works to change the international rules-based order and establish regional hegemony. And it's where the Russian Federation seizes opportunities created by chaos and instability. Ladies and gentlemen, we must deter these nations and other malign actors from their goals on the continent. Many of our security and economic interests overlap with those of our African and European partners. Successful outcomes enabled by burden sharing are beneficial for all. As a posture-limited theater, we establish strength and work towards peace by enhancing security capabilities of our African partners through our robust system of alliances. Exercises, training events, security cooperation, and foreign military sales programs are the backbone of our military activities on the continent. Through these activities, our forces lead by example with a warrior ethos and stand by our partners and enhance trust in the United States military. United States AFRICOM seeks to match capabilities with current and emerging threats to ensure that security of our forces while advancing American interests. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, crisis response forces, counter-unmanned aerial systems technology, and integrated air missile defense platforms are critical resources to accomplish our mission. I welcome your advocacy in ensuring that these necessary tools are in AFRICOM's hands. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'd like to close by thanking the committee for your stalwart support during my tenure of command. Our ability to accomplish the mission is always linked to your advocacy and encouragement, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Langley. Chair now recognizes himself for questions. General Kurilla, Operation Rough Rider degraded Houthi capabilities and took a target off U.S. commercial ships. But they still keep hitting at Israel. What more can the U.S. do to support Israel against the Houthis and Iran's other terrorist proxies?
So I would tell you right now that the Iranian proxies are at one of the weakest levels they've been. They did decimation of the disintegration of the Hezbollah, Hamas. However, the Houthis, the biggest challenge with the Houthis is they are being provided with Iranian weapons. They provide the weapons and they assemble them inside of Yemen. There are experts from the IRGC that are inside of Yemen helping them to be able to manufacture these systems as well. So this is going to be a challenge going forward. We have got to stop the flow of the weapons into Yemen.
Thank you. President Trump's made it clear that if Iran doesn't permanently give up its nuclear enrichment, military force by the U.S. may be necessary. If the president directed, is CENTCOM prepared to respond with overwhelming force to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran?
I have provided the Secretary of Defense and the President a wide range of options.
I take that as a yes.
Yes.
General Langley, your command was created in 2007 to address the shortcomings of the division of Africa between CENTCOM, INDOPACOM, and EUCOM. Since then, Africa's strategic importance has only grown, with transnational terrorism on the rise, as well as China and Russia working to undermine our interest on the continent. Can you tell me, in your best military judgment, should AFRICOM remain its own combatant command separate and apart from EUCOM?
Chairman, those statistics that you just stated is more of a reason why AFRICOM needs to remain as a overall command to be able to address these challenges. Africa is a nexus theater for the great power competition, and then also with a number of violent extremist organizations that are encroaching upon the continent. It is a threat. It is a threat to our homeland, and it's a threat for our overall national security and protection of our national interests.
Yeah. I take that as a yes.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes, and I fully agree with you. I made it very clear publicly that I will vigorously oppose any effort to consolidate AFRICOM into EUCOM. As you heard in my opening statement, we need to be putting more resources in AFRICOM to combat what China and Russia and Iran are doing, rather than looking at taking away attention and resources. General Corelli, yesterday the ranking member and I introduced the SPEED Act. It's our effort by this committee to try to speed up acquisition of critical warfighting capabilities to strengthen our defense industrial base. What impact, if any, do you think this could have on our ability to help our partners in CENTCOM?
Thanks, Chairman. I have not read the full act, but I do know that it's trying to speed acquisition, change acquisition to get into the hands of the warfighter. Anything we can do to fix what I think is a very bureaucratic and slow process will help the warfighter.
Is there something else that you would suggest that we do to try
I think we need to start from scratch with a blank piece of paper on the FMS process. We've had dozens of task forces to look at FMS, and I have not seen much change. It is one of the #1 complaints that we get from our foreign partners, and we are 40% of the entire FMS projects in the region.
And if you had that blank sheet of paper and you were writing it out, tell me what you would do with it.
Well, I think there's 4 levers that control FMS. There's DOD. I think we have to fix some of our own processes internal on these requests.
Such as?
Well, I think sometimes we take months and up to a year when someone says, I'd like to sell you Patriots, and we go back and forth for a year. That should be days or weeks. It then goes to the State Department. Candidly, that is not where our holdup is. I think this body of Congress, there can be holds up for whatever reason that we hold. We don't want to sell a weapon system to a country. And candidly, the biggest problem we have right now is with industry, that they are not putting the investments in capital into their production lines. The biggest thing I think Congress can help with is multi-year funding that would be able, if you're a business and you say, I'm only going to get funded 1 year, they're not going to want to put the capital into those production lines. I thank you for what you've done with some of the 2-year funding, but I think it needs to be multi-year funding so that we can get these production lines up. And I think we got to look at our partners that are offering to also produce inside the region. Sorry for the long response.
Well, I think that last point especially would be very helpful, and I think I speak for this committee when I say we're open to that idea. I hope that when you testify before the appropriators, you tell them the same thing. With that, I yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to Iran and their nuclear program, without getting into the more classified discussion about what Israel might do on their own, if Israel were to act on their own and attack Iran, what implications would that have for our force protection in your region? And what should we be doing to try to, put ourselves in a position to protect against that?
I think it would increase risk to force of our forces in the region, but every day we're making assessments of our posture and our risk to force, and we make adjustments based on those. We're fielding new systems and new equipment and making adjustments every single day. We have a rule in CENTCOM, you improve your foxhole every single day, whether that's through rehearsals or any other actions that you're taking to better protect our forces.
And what are the systems that you think are working best if we were to, throw money at you and say, here's what you need right now that could best put you in a better position to protect your forces? What systems would you ask for?
So counter-UAS is the #1 thing. We have a revolution in warfare. The character of warfare is changing with the drone revolution and unmanned systems. We see that in Ukraine. We saw that with the Houthis, and we see that even in Iraq and Syria. The #1 challenge out there is detect. It's the ability to detect the counter-UAS systems and to defeat the swarms. And I think anything we can do in the air defense world, we went back to the FMS. We ought to ask ourselves the question, why does a THAAD missile cost 3 times as much has an arrow that is jointly developed between the U.S. and Israel and the Missile Defense Agency? Why is an SM-3 Block 2B 6 times more expensive than an Arrow missile with roughly the same capabilities?
Yeah. In Syria, what's your, and I realize this is a huge diplomatic piece of this, but you are a diplomat as well as a warrior. Where, can you give us an update on where you see the Syrian government? Obviously, it's crucial that that government stabilize and block Iran and Russia from getting back in. What can we most do to help that, and where do you see it at right now?
I think what the president did was talking about lifting some of the sanctions. That's going to allow other countries to come in and bring some of the investments. That is one of the things that's desperately needed, is the investments back into the country. We're working directly right now with the Syrian Democratic Forces, our Kurdish partners and Arab partners on the ground going after ISIS, to get them to integrate in with the new Syrian government. Turkey has played a very positive role in that. That is a big piece for the stability in terms of that. I think they got to figure out how to run all of the administration of their country. They have a few people that are running the country right now. I am very concerned with the stability, but I think the fact that we are at the table now having those discussions, the upside is great, the downside is very low to being at the table.
How important is our troop presence in Syria to helping facilitate that process and continue to keep ISIS at bay?
So our purpose for being in Syria is for the de-ISIS fight. We literally took a strike this morning on an external operations leader from Central Asia up in northwest Syria. We're still waiting for the full results of that. That's what our forces do inside of Syria. We've made some adjustments, some consolidation of bases based on the fall of Assad. Right now we're making an assessment going forward of what other bases. It's all conditions-based, that I'll make my recommendations to the Secretary of Defense and the President. But right now, the guidance to me has been given to right now make an assessment on if any other adjustments that we need to make in our posture.
Yeah, General Langley, there's a lot of concerning aspects to Africa, but West Africa right now seems to be the most concerning. I mean, it seems that the most capable terrorist organization is, gaining influence in multiple countries and threatening others. We don't have much of a presence there. What would be your recommendation in terms of how we contain that threat that is growing out of West Africa?
Ranking Member, I would say, since we moved out of Niger, we had to reset our CT strategy. And that's further engagement, especially with the coastal West Africa countries who are building capabilities and capacity to deter. And a number of countries is working, but JNM, which is and AQIM, and also ISIS Sahel are really starting to get their footing and affect themselves across the Sahel, AES countries of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. I think that just collaboration with our partners in increasing institutional capacity for enduring solution against those aforementioned VEOs. To do that, it takes a whole of government approach. Not so much our whole of government, but their whole of government, and we need to invest in that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes his gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Amade, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, generals, for your leadership and your service for our country. And as a former Army Reserve intelligence officer who served in the Middle East, it is incredible to see President Trump's bold vision and a Middle East defined by, quote, commerce, not chaos. Now, those words are now backed by decisive actions that nobody dreamed possible. Now, President Trump changed Syria's path overnight from endless bloodshed towards hope. There's a lot of optimism right there, and I know Ambassador Tom Barrack and Presidential Envoy Barrack's doing an incredible job in Syria, hitting the ground running. I don't know, he has a lot of flights back and forth from Ankara to Damascus. But General Kurilla, I know there's so many questions about Syria's transition, and after coming off of a 50-year Assad rule and ISIS mostly defeated, and I know you helped with you just talked about it briefly, with the agreement between integrating the Syrian Kurdish forces with the government forces of Syria. How's that integration actually going?
I would tell you it's actually going well right now. There's some sticking points, but what's happening is you have the Syrian Kurds are talking directly to al-Shara and the Syrian government right now. Turkey has played a positive role in that as well, but I think that we're on a good path right now. And
do you envision that integration could also include other minority militia like the Druze or the Christians or Alawites in Syria?
It could. Right now, though, I mean, we're focused on our partner that we have right now up in the Northeast, and that's the Kurds.
Very good. And our counter ISIS train and equip fund, which helped the Syrian Kurds destroy ISIS, could be wrapping up. Now, can or should the train and equip shift to include Syria's forces?
I think that would have to be a wait and see. I think the fact that we're at the table right now having this discussion, and that will allow us to make an assessment of that if that would be a wise choice.
And how concerned are you about the foreign fighters possibly being integrated within the Syrian armed forces?
That is the reason we have to take a wait and see on this.
And are they integrating them right now?
So right now, I mean, if you remember, these are some of the people that brought Shara into power. They are integrated into some portions of the government, and this is something that we have to make an assessment on.
Very good. Now, shifting toward Iraq, the same train and equip fund is also used in Iraq. But why are we subsidizing Iraq currently when it's withholding public salaries and military equipment from our Kurdish allies up north?
They have challenges every now and then. We end up working through them. They end up getting the salaries. They end up getting the equipment. There's always small frictions that we have to work through, but they are getting what they need.
Sure. And Iran's stronghold within Iraq, is that presence increasing even despite all of the setbacks that Iran has been facing the last few months?
I think Iran is trying to double down on getting a grip inside of Iraq, but I think Iraq is a sovereign nation, and they don't want to be a vassal state of Iran.
Of course, but although there's a lot of Iranian militias currently still operating Iraq, I know they're holding a hostage, Elizabeth Surkov, that we want released as well. But how do you envision us pulling Iraq from Iran's stronghold?
It is a challenge because it's their next door neighbor. We partner at the military level with the Iraqi security forces to go after ISIS. They are doing actually a very good job in terms of going after ISIS. We killed the global number two ISIS, Abu Khadija, out in the Anbar with the assistance of the Iraqis. So I think from a military to military standpoint, they understand the need and why they want to have a relationship with the West. There are a lot of other reasons at the State Department level on why we want to have a relationship with Iraq. A stable Iraq helps with a stable Middle East.
Thank you, General. And shifting to AFRICOM, General Langley, I know you have a lot of positive things to say about Morocco, and I do as well, as they were the first country to recognize the United States independence, and it seems like their alliance is increasing with us. Do you ever envision moving the headquarters of AFRICOM from Germany to an African partner country like Morocco?
Congressman, thanks for that question. And as I would look at it from the operational perspective, cost-benefit analysis, the benefit of moving to Morocco would not exceed the cost. The benefit operationally of us being able to operate from Stuttgart headquarters onto it does not benefit in amount. The cost of moving the headquarters would be a big dent to our budget. So I would say from a cost analysis perspective, I think we are advantageous where we are right now. When we look at the overall costs, we would not be benefiting from moving our headquarters onto the African continent at large. But let me just say, Morocco is a great partner, and what they do in exporting security is tremendous, especially in the sub-Saharan countries.
Very good. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell.
Matthew 20:16, so the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Representative Wilson and Courtney, if you need any tips on how to maximize your time, Rep. Amade and myself are experts in this particular committee. I want to thank you to the chair, to our ranking member, to our witnesses, as well as the service members I see behind you for your service as well. My district in the greater St. Louis region is home to the production of some of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, including many that CENTCOM has used in recent operations, such as intercepting incoming Iranian drones and missiles that targeted Israel and our regional allies. While I'm proud to represent a region that contributes so significantly to our national defense, I must also acknowledge that many of my constituents are still struggling to recover from the most devastating natural disaster to impact our state since the late 1950s. But as a region, we will recover, and we are committed to build and support our domestic industrial base that is crucial to our national security. But what is not crucial to our national security is turning our backs on our allies. Like we've seen from the administration and cutting essential foreign assistance programs that go hand in hand with our efforts to promote strong U.S. global leadership. China and Russia have made significant military and economic inroads across the African continent, posing serious implications for U.S. strategic interests. At the same time, the Trump administration, under the guise of pursuing efficiency, has slashed funding for global development and humanitarian programs. These cuts have, in practice, created greater inefficiencies and undermined U.S. influence abroad. General Langley, how does U.S. economic aid, how does U.S. economic and humanitarian engagement on the continent contribute to advancing AFRICOM's military objectives, particularly when it comes to countering the destabilizing influence of Russia and China?
Congressman, thanks for that question. And I'll just go back on the operations, especially the operations that we do in Somalia. So when we support the Somali National Army, as they've gone through numerous phases to the liberation phase of significant regions across Somalia, they get into phase 4. And some of the capabilities that outside of the kinetics and military operations, they were able to stabilize the region. So we're at a point now looking forward to what worked as far as aid in the past, but this is where the Secretary has charged me with engaging other countries of a shared burden. A shared burden of looking at contributing countries, not only troop contributing, but also in phase 4 operation, which is stabilization. So those discussions are taking place at a higher level, at the policy level, and engagement with other countries, so that we can focus, laser focus on countering terrorism and a shared burden with other countries to be able to take up that void. Over.
And since Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack against Israel, one notable development has been the strengthening of military and security partnerships between Israel and its Arab neighbors, especially evident during the 2 Iranian missile and drone attacks last year. This growing security cooperation has shown potential in laying the groundwork for peace. And to the ranking member's point, we endeavor to see a future for Palestine beyond Hamas. So, General Kurilla, from a security perspective, how can enhanced cooperation between Israeli and Palestinian security forces or broader regional security coordination help establish a foundation for long-term peace and stability?
Great question, Congressman. There has to be, Hamas cannot be in charge. There has to be an alternative to Hamas. I think that is some form of a Palestinian governance. I think the regional partners can work with Israel to figure out what that is and with the Palestinian people.
For almost 20 months, the Iranian-backed Houthis have wreaked havoc across the region, causing significant instability. The administration recently announced an agreement to cease all operations against the Houthis in exchange for a halt in their attacks on U.S. ships. I will submit my question, but I want to talk about how this agreement excludes our regional allies and the implications of that. But
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mismer.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. General Kurilla, I couldn't agree with you more that FMS reform is needed, and we just have to do better in that regard. In addition to reforming the FMS and DCS process, would you also agree with the need to reform or eliminate other non-treaty agreements that inhibit our ability to work with our allies and partners, such as the Missile Technology Control Regime?
Can you say the question again, please, Congressman?
Yes. How could, other than FMS and the DCS process, would you agree that we need to reform or eliminate other non-treaty agreements that inhibit our ability to work with our allies and partners, such as Missile Technology Control Regime?
I think we should find those partners in the region that we know can safeguard the technologies, and we should work with them. We have several in the region that have offered up to say they would like to help produce. That is where we need help, is the production line right now, and I think that's something we should strongly look at.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the professionalism of our forces who have conducted operations in the Red Sea, but I'm wondering what work needs to be done on the policy end with our regional allies and within our own interagency to devise a successful strategy against Yemen, both that deters their destabilizing military actions of the Houthis and coerce them into making their closure of the Red Sea politically untenable in the region.
Was that to me or to policy?
To you.
So I think well, I'll defer to policy first for any policy question, then
Okay.
I'll take that.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I would just highlight two things. First, with the conclusion of Operation Rough Rider, we are not certainly in a position where we are ending our entire engagement regarding the Houthi problem set. The Houthis are still under a foreign terrorist organization designation, and we're still pursuing a whole of government approach, which obviously includes other interagency elements to tackle this problem set. And then I would just highlight some of the comments that you made just a moment ago, which is this will, the longer term problem set for Yemen and the Houthis writ large really is something that in our relationships with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and our other Gulf partners, this is something where we'll look to burden share this effort and really develop a regional solution that empowers our Gulf partners that we've continued to develop a deeper defense partnership with to tackle the long-term elements of the problem set.
Thank you. General Kurla, I also have concerns about the long-term stability and strategic implications of using high-end platforms and munitions like the B-2 bomber, Jasmine, and Tomahawk cruise missiles against supposedly unsophisticated adversaries like the Houthis. Has use of these platforms and the rapid proliferation of adversarial drones led to more consideration toward the effectiveness of directed energy technologies encountered these platforms?
Yeah, we absolutely need to be putting more work into directed energy, high-powered microwave. I think some of the innovations that have come out of this since Operation Rough Rider, about 40% of the drones shot down were shot down by something called Advanced Precision Weapon Kill System, a laser-guided 2.75-inch rocket fired off our F-16s or F-15s. That's a $25,000 munition going against a roughly $50,000 or $100,000 drone that is an Iranian-provided drone to the Houthis.
Okay, excellent. So what role can our defense industrial base play in advancing directed energy solutions to ensure CENTCOM can maintain their technological advantage?
So I would compliment someone like General Randy George and his Army Transformation Initiative. He is sending things over once they reach a technology readiness level to a certain level. He sent over directed energy mobile short-range air defense. We brought it into the theater. We tested it in the harshest conditions you can find against an active enemy and a thinking enemy, and we provided feedback on its effectiveness to make it better so they can make a better informed decision on that. We have the same with high-powered microwave. We're doing things with software. Software is a weapon as well, and rapidly changing this. The character of warfare has changed with the drone revolution, and that's what we need to be paying attention to.
Okay, thank you. Also, how would you assess the performance of Israel's missile defense architecture during recent fighting, particularly systems like David's Sling and Arrow that we co-produced?
So I would tell you that the missile defense, out of the 300-plus missiles that were fired into Israel, one person was killed, a Palestinian from Gaza who was living in Jericho.
Okay, thank you. Has the attack highlighted any gaps in our budget requiring additional resources from Congress?
I think we need to figure out how we also produce, I go back to my comment, why does a THAAD cost 3 times as much as an Arrow? Why does an SM3 Block 2B cost 6 times as much?
Yeah.
We've got to figure that out because we are on the wrong side of the cost curve.
Very good. Congress has appropriated...
Gentleman's time's expired, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses and General Kurla and General Langley. Thank you for your decades of uniformed service. I want to thank you, General Langley, for these great placemats. I mean, it's a fantastic graphic depiction of why Africa is so important to our national security now and into the future. And in particular, the things that I sort of honed in on is the fact that it's 11 of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. 25% of the 193 countries in the General Assembly of the UN hold seats in Africa. And the rare earths is probably maybe even more interesting in how much China controls here. So in this context, in this sort of geopolitical context, when we look at all the elements of power, we have diplomatic, information, military, economic, and I know there are various iterations of this. Ms. Thompson, you emphasized the importance of countering China's influence in Africa. However, this week, the House is voting on a rescission package that cuts $3.7 billion in soft power. For example, hundreds of millions in cuts to PEPFAR, a program started by George W. Bush. Forgetting the more than 25 million lives saved by PEPFAR since the program started in 2003, there's no question that this has been an effective program in extending America's power and influence. This has made us safer and boosted our national security. And in the testimony that DOD sent over for today's briefing, said, unfortunately, the CCP information manipulation is significantly outpacing our efforts to counter their campaigns. Unchecked, China's efforts could reshape the information landscape in Africa, creating biases and gaps that could lead African nations to make decisions to subordinate the economic and security interests to China's own. So my question is, given sort of the withdrawal that we've seen this administration take in the information environment and communicating through, Voice of America and other entities that are specifically focused on Africa, and in withdrawal of these critical soft power programs, are we more or less in a position to make sure that our military objectives are achieved?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I can't speak explicitly to the State Department equities in this, particularly the humanitarian aid that you speak about. However, I will say from a Title X DOD perspective, obviously the department has...
I'm sorry, let me stop you for a second. I'm talking about like sort of these elements of power, all right? And there's a balance to these, right? So by withdrawing from the informational, from the economic elements, does that make achieving the military objectives more or less difficult?
Appreciate the question, sir. What I would say from a DOD perspective, thinking exclusively about the Title X assistance that we provide, particularly on the continent, that's part of our review process, is understanding how our
okay. Let me pause you right there. General Langley, same question to you. Does this make achieving the military objectives more or less difficult?
Especially in the MISO, we just, as far as our information operations, countering some of the propaganda that the CCP is putting out there. Yes, that's where we need to be able to confront them, because we had a lot of success in the past, and even going forward, Secretary Hicks has given us the tools to press back on the CCP.
So thank you, General Langley. I heard yes, which I think is the short answer to the question, and I just want to make sure I get
that we need to counter them going forward.
Switching gears to the Houthis, General Kurilla, over the last few months, we spent over $1 billion attacking the Houthis. And our campaign, can you evaluate whether we've disrupted, neutralized, destroyed their capabilities?
So the president gave us a very specific mission, which was to get the Houthis to quit shooting at American ships. 6 months ago, on 12 November 2024, was the last time a destroyer went through the Bab el-Mandeb. It was attacked 17 times with anti-ship ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles and UAVs. In the last week, we've put 4 destroyers back through the Bab el-Mandeb, and we were not shot at.
Okay, I got that. They're not attacking U.S. shipping. Are they still attacking Israel? Yes or no?
They are still attacking Israel, and we are still defending Israel with our THAAD system.
Thank you. So,
gentlemen's times have expired. Mr. McGuire, you're now recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses and to all of our military folks here. We wouldn't have a country without you. Thank you. Ms. Thompson, we really appreciate what you're doing in this administration with Peace Through Strength. I think we all agree you have to have strong American leadership in the world, or you have a lot of problems. How has the President's outreach to the new government in Syria encouraged a good outcome for our Kurdish partners in the Syrian Democratic Forces?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And I would highlight the president's speech in Riyadh, in particular, this idea that the Middle East region is transitioning from chaos to a region focused on commerce and empowerment. I think that this is an incredible good news story when it comes to the conversation around Syria. We are giving the Syrian government a chance, and stability, if it holds in Syria, will be monumental for the region. And it's something that the administration is really leaning forward on as a whole of government effort. Obviously, it's conditions-based, and we'll be very careful as we watch the developments, but it's a really positive, good news story that further underscores that the region is really transitioning from this region of chaos into a region focused on prosperity.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, since President Trump took office, have counterterrorism operations remained static, or has there been an increase in operations in Somalia that have removed a number of terrorists from the battlefield?
Thank you for the question. I will defer to General Langley on any additional operational comments, but I would say, yes, the Somalia elements that you highlight, the increase in precision targeting in Somalia to take out terrorists who specifically pose a threat to the U.S. homeland, demonstrating the capability and intent to carry out operations against the U.S. homeland, our forces and our people, is an incredible success as part of this administration's effort. Obviously, countering terrorism and protecting the homeland is one of our #1 national security objectives, and I think that the activities in Somalia since day one really do highlight the capabilities that we have, and so I would offer General Langley the opportunity for any operational comments.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Congressman, for the question. And I would say that, when the president gave me expanded authorities and through the Secretary of Defense, we've been pressurizing ISIS in the Golan Mountains considerably. That is reinstituting deterrence in a kinetic way. And they are yielding to it to the point that they are considering moving to seek refuge elsewhere. So that this is what the warrior ethos in the lethality that we've imposed in the Golan Mountains against a foe that has the capability of attacking our homeland. I think this movement to increase our lethal effects on them is causing there to establish a pause.
Thank you. General Kurilla, Iran and its proxies across CENTCOM continue to use drones to target critical infrastructure, military installations, and commercial shipping in the region. The conflict in Ukraine and Iran's attacks on Israel have highlighted the challenges posed by saturation attacks comprised of UAS and missile threats. And I'm concerned about the survivability of high-value air defense systems like Patriot, THAAD, against drones and drone swarms in the Middle East as tensions remain high. As the threat from proliferated small UAS technology grows in CENTCOM, to the extent you can share in an open setting, how is the Army thinking about requirements to defend deployed assets in theater against coordinated attacks from advanced aerial threats like drones and drone swarms?
So that's why you want to have a layered defense, Congressman, and we start everything from they can reach as far out, ballistic missile, all the way down to the Group 1 quadcopters. We have capabilities that we layer against all of that, whether it's electronic or kinetic, non-kinetic means as well. What the Army is doing to help us with that is General George is doing his Army Transformation Initiative, sending forward capability not to replace but to augment, to put it in those harshest conditions in CENTCOM against an active thinking enemy. And we give him feedback on the effectiveness of those to make it better before they do large purchases of those equipment.
Perfect. All right. From your perspective, General Kurilla, and for integration, would it be better to baseline these requirements into existing weapon systems like Patriot or THAAD, or separate?
What we want to be able to do is have a layered defense, but we need all of those systems to talk to each other. We can't have one-off proprietary software systems that don't work with one overarching software system that controls all of them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for our witness for answering the questions, and I yield back.
Mr. Tran, you're recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Langley, General Kurilla, thank you so much for your service. Ms. Thompson, welcome. General Langley, you rightfully stated that Africa is a nexus theater where global interests converge and the United States continues to face fierce competition from China and Russia across the continent. Chinese state-owned firms now hold stakes in 78 African ports, and China is currently negotiating a second PLA Navy base in Gabon. In your testimony, you mentioned that the U.S. approach to Africa is African partner-led, U.S. and ally-enabled. General Langley, in your view, which African partners are the most important to furthering U.S. interests on the continent and why?
Congressman, thanks for that question. And it's a broad question, but as far as China is concerned and their aspirations to become a global hegemon, I'll just give a statistic that's pretty compelling. They're outspending AFRICOM militarily 100-1. So as they have basing aspirations across the globe, but especially in Africa, in those places, whether it's on the east side or the west side, they're trying to close the gap from a geostrategic positioning to be able to stop our joint forces for employing across the globe, or A2AD, in which aerial denial, anti-access. And then also the critical minerals, trying to control those supply chains. So those geostrategic ways of affecting their geopolitical means to engage with a number of countries. It's too many to state.
Sure, I appreciate that. And then, with U.S. engagement with certain African countries being either cooled or stalled entirely, General Langley, why is continued engagement with those African countries that are still engaged with the U.S. so essential for our national security?
Absolutely, because some of these countries we have shared interests in, and we see it as essential for the purposes of the shared commitment of stability and security across the region, not only for counterterrorism, but just for international rules-based order. A number of these countries see the importance of that, and that's why we have shared national security objectives, so they can get to the future of being able to stand on their own and be able to create prosperity across the future. And a number of countries side with the United States in our ways to do it.
Thank you. General Langley, you mentioned in your opening that Morocco is an example of success from our investment. Was hard power the sole tool we deployed for that success? And generally, do you believe that hard power is the only tool we have to further U.S. interest in Africa?
It's a portfolio of a number of powers, whole government, building institutional capacity, having the African countries take a lead and share with one another as a whole has proven to be the success against a number of layered threats that are stalling progress across the African continent.
That's right, and we need to be thinking about all levers of power, including the soft power tools at our disposal when looking to counter Chinese influence, deter further adversarial military expansion, and to protect access to critical minerals on the continent. In fact, that is why I plan on voting against a rescission package on the House floor this week that rescinds bilateral and multilateral investment in places like Africa. General Kurila, how is the U.S. military supporting the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza, and what obstacles have you observed that are preventing the seamless delivery of such aid?
So we have, in the past, we've delivered humanitarian aid through both air, sea, and land. We were working with the Jordanians. We helped screen the convoys that would then bring in the food for that. But right now, we are not actively working the humanitarian aid.
Is there a reason why we're not?
I mean, that right now, Israel has contracted an American company that is doing the distribution inside of Gaza. Hamas hates that because Hamas no longer has control over that distribution. So this is an American private company that Israel did. There was no, CENTCOM was not part of that contracted this, that is doing 1 million-ish meals, I think they're doing a day, a little more than that, through this private company.
And are we prepared to help if Israel was to ask for our assistance?
We are prepared if the President directs us to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service and your testimony here today.
Thank you.
Chairman, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kurila, I want to congratulate you on a fantastic career.
Well, thank you,
for
sir.
your service to the country. It's wonderful. I'd also like to acknowledge your Master Chief back there. Derek and I worked together for, well, you could probably tell for how long by the color of my beard and the amount of hair we both have on our heads. So you did well by yourself there, General. General Langley, you're a Marine, right? And then the Marine hymn from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, right? Tripoli, that's Libya. And we went to war with them because the Barbary pirates were kidnapping our citizens. Thomas Jefferson did not want to do that, but he did. And other nations were paying tribute to these pirates and we said enough, right? So I'd like to gently remind some of my colleagues that sit over there, if they actually did their homework and read the rescissions packages that are proposed by the Trump administration, we're removing what can really reasonably be titled 21st century tribute. So we're going to be assisting our African partners, our Middle East partners, but we're not paying tribute anymore. Those days are over. And you're in that uniform because we stopped paying tribute back then. So I can forward the package to anybody over there if you actually want to read it instead of just complaining. So former Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said he would take the Taliban at their word when they're talking about anti-terrorist operations, counter-terrorist operations, and human rights, in particular to rights of women in Afghanistan. General Kurilla, how's that work out for women in Afghanistan?
Not very well right now.
Not very well. Okay, so the Houthis now have said that, okay, my bad, we're going to stop shooting missiles at ships. And I would encourage everybody to give as much validity to the Taliban statement as we did, or excuse me, to the Houthi statement as we did, or should have, to the Taliban. General Langley and General Kurilla, I've spoke to the Special Operations Component commanders about this, so I understand the issue with the Houthis is not a seam, between your two COCOMs. But can you, in this setting, can you tell me, do we know how the Houthis are being resupplied by Iran?
Vast majority of it is by sea. They put them on, they come out of the ports in Iran. They put them on dhows, stateless dhows. Some of them go on maritime vessels into Djibouti. On the UN vessel inspection mechanism, they put stuff inside a container. If you have a ship with 500 containers and it's in the bottom of it, you can put all those sensitive components in the bottom of that. Now, a positive thing that just happened in the last month is that the UN vessel inspection mechanism decided to go to 100% inspection of containers. I think it needs to be 100% unloading of all the containers to see what's inside of them. But that's a positive step, but probably about 80 to 85% goes by sea.
Okay. Why are we not sinking these vessels? So we have a terrorist nation, Iran, with their minions. They're sending lethal munitions to the minions, which have shut off the Red Sea for commercial traffic. Why aren't we sinking? I guess maybe that's a question.
Well, we have to find the ships. The hardest part is to find that ship.
Right.
At any given time, there's between 3,000 and 5,000 dhows on between the Iran and Bab el-Mandeb. That's the same distance from the tip of Florida to Boston that you're trying to find these dhows.
I lived in Djibouti for a long time, and I sent some of my guys to Yemen, and that was a big secret, and it's not anymore, obviously. But Ms. Thompson, have you guys looked at this from a policy perspective? I mean, the last two SEALs that were killed in combat, unfortunately, were in the Red Sea. Derek and I's teammates, and they were boarding these vessels to try to prevent these munitions from getting to the Houthis. So this is very personal to me. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you for the question, Congressman, and rightly understood. I can say more on some of the particular policy elements in closed session on this, but what I would say is one of the elements that we have looked at and continue to engage on is our European partners. They are actually very well equipped to continue to help us with this effort, particularly from their positioning in the region.
Ms. Thompson, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to because I have 20 seconds left. Right now, from a policy perspective, from the DOD, if the United States of America understands, our European allies find a ship and we know for sure that there are munitions on there that are going to the Houthis, can we just sink it?
We can board it. We have the authority to board it, and if we find the munitions, we'll take the crew, we'll transfer that crew, and we can end up sinking the ship. We did one on a dhow 2 weeks ago.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Whitesides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kurilla, General Langley, thank you both for being here today, and thank you, ma'am, for being here today. And I want to echo my colleagues in thanking you for your distinguished service. I want to begin by talking about a trip that we took last month. We went to the CENTCOM area of responsibility, including Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE, with Ranking Member Smith and a bipartisan delegation from this committee. I have to say, General Kurilla, how impressed I was by the dedication and professionalism of the men and women serving in your AOR, especially given the rapidly shifting landscape in that part of the world. That dedication is incredibly important. The Middle East is a place that deserves American attention and investment, as I'm sure you would agree. General Kurilla, in your time as CENTCOM commander, you've seen the culmination of the civil war in Syria, the explosion of conflict in Gaza, a changing paradigm in Yemen, and much more. In my visit, I heard a sense of concern from our allies in the region amid the serious change. Some of our partners in the Middle East worry that we're taking our eyes off the ball. General Kurilla, what are the tangible, concrete steps you think are necessary to reassure our allies that we are still focused on your AOR and that we still stand with them?
So I think words matter and actions matter. I think what we are doing is we are transitioning from a security guarantor to a security integrator. I think we have to have a sufficient and a sustainable posture. So we can't take everything. We have to have enough that we can still be able to partner with our partners in the region. We need to be able to give them the military equipment, the foreign military sales, so that I can be integrated into the region. We saw that on the defense of Israel, systems that can talk to each other, and this is one of the challenges with foreign military sales. They have real security needs. If we don't fill them, they're going to fill them. China shows up with an Amazon catalog. They say, pick anything in here. I'll give you financing, free shipping, prime shipping, and no end-user agreement. But I tell them it'll never touch our networks. So we've got to be able to provide them the tools that they need to integrate in the region, and then we become the security integrator.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We actually heard that from several times over there. We also need to be more responsive in being able to fulfill the deals that we do so that people are not waiting, 10 years or whatever for the systems. Maybe we can work together with that. Anyway, next question. What we're seeing around the world is that allies are regarding the United States as an increasingly uncertain partner as we impose and then remove unilateral tariffs, consider cutting active duty and foreign assistance programs, and discuss using military force to take the territory of other nations like Greenland. I believe that we are made safer through our alliances and that making our alliances doubt our resolve makes us less strong. That is particularly true in Africa, where China has made long-term efforts through various initiatives. Meanwhile, the new administration muses publicly about terminating AFRICOM. General Langley, can you describe in general terms the concerns you have heard from our African allies and security partners about this potential administration policy change and the impact it would have on our nation's security and economic resource requirements?
Congressman, I was in Nairobi last week, and I would say the message from the Secretary of Defense by the chiefs of defense across Africa was well received. They get that they need to be able to provide their own security. They get that they do not need to be dependent on us anymore. There's things that they think that they can share in the burden, and they are ready to shift, such as countries like Morocco and Tunisia and Kenya. But there's others also in that as well. So they articulate what they need to push to that level. But at this point here, I think everything is positive, that they need to be able to take on their own security for Africa to prosper writ large.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your service. I yield back. Thanks.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, gentlemen, thank you for being here. I look at the flags behind you, and it means a lot to us. I look at the streamers on those flags, what they stand for, what they represent. I think about the service that you two gentlemen have provided to your country and the blood that you've shared and the friends that you've lost, brothers and sisters that are represented in some of those streamers on those flags. The significance of a hearing like this cannot be overstated, really. We are in an era of adjustment for our nation, whereby we can move into the 21st century as a dominant military force worldwide in order to maintain and preserve or establish peace. And Congress has an incredibly significant job to do to listen to the experts that is provided to us so that we can improve the means by which we provide our warfighters with modern technology. So I thank you for being here and for your service. General Kurilla, you had mentioned multi-year funding versus 1 or 2 year funding. Would you please clarify for this committee the difference between multi-year funding for the DoD versus multi-year contracting for our defense contractors? Because we don't want to lock into a technology that could be replaced by a better, less expensive technology. Would you touch on that?
Sure, I agree. I mean, one of the challenges I think you have, if you're a business and you make X, you have this production line, but if you know you're only going to get money from these companies, you're spreading that out. You only have so much production line. So when we have partners come to us and say, we would like to purchase X, and we tell them they can get it in 2029 because we don't have the production capability, that is a concern. I'm also just as concerned that the industrial base cannot keep up with the weapon expenditure. Every conflict that we've had recently has underestimated the weapons. Russia, Ukraine, Israel. And so I think what we want to
Right,
do...
yes, sir. So not to interrupt you, but you're at the heart of the problem. What I want to get to here is that if we have to find the sweet spot, and I'm going to ask you what that is. We have a problem of historically like constant design changes with a program. We have to move away from that. If we have multi-year funding for the Department of Defense that gives greater executive authority to accomplish the mission, and build and procure and take delivery of the right vessels and craft. But we don't want to be locked into a multi-year contract with a particular defense contractor because that would insulate us against the emergence of significantly better tech that's more effective and more lethal and less expensive. We have to be able to make that shift. So what is that sweet spot?
I can't tell you exactly what the sweet spot is, but I do know we have to be agile. We've been making Patriot missiles for a very, very long time, so the multi-year funding on that, I don't know if it's 3 to 5 years, but if I'm a businessman, I'm not going to build new production lines.
Understood.
I don't know if I'm going to get money next year.
That's for like existing tech. Okay, shifting to some tech that's out there that I want to know if it's being shared. Some of our allies in the Middle East are incredibly wealthy. They have unlimited funding for research and development. And from my research indicates that they are fielding some autonomous tech that is far beyond what we have. Are they sharing that with us?
So we are partnered with several of these partners in the Middle East. We do share quite a bit. There are some things that we know that they are using as well, but we have quite a bit of visibility on that.
And finally, what would it take to wipe out Houthi operational capabilities, sir?
I think the number one thing that has to happen is to have Iran quit resupplying them. That they would die on the vine without Iranian support.
Die on the vine. We would like that. General Langley, General Kurilla, Ms. Thompson, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, and generals, thank you for your decades of service to this nation. It is greatly appreciated. I'm going to start where my colleague left off with the Houthis. Even though we've negotiated the ceasefire with a designated terrorist organization, they continue to launch attacks, as we've said, both at our allies and continue to place global commerce at risk. What can you tell us in this open session about the specific drones attack on Israel, and what are we learning from that?
The specific what, ma'am?
Drone attacks on Israel.
From Iran or from the Houthis?
From the Houthis.
So for the Houthis, I mean, we are still shooting down Houthi UAVs that are going towards Israel. They have taken an Iranian UAV, it's called a CAS-04, with some modifications, additional gas, they call it a Yafa. It has there's some Houthi firsts here, but it's Iranian equipment that can go 2,600 kilometers. And so when we have that, we've shot down dozens of them. And so they are taking a very simple UAV, extending the range of it, and then Israel has effective defenses as well.
It's been said, but I want to reiterate, we're in, between Ukraine and this region, hypersonic technology development, particularly with drones. What evidence do you have that the Houthis are sharing their drone warfare knowledge with our adversaries?
So with other adversaries, so I will take you back to July of 2024. We killed 7 individuals in Iraq that were setting up 2 UAVs. Of the 7 individuals killed, there was a Houthi UAV expert, a brigadier general. There was an Iranian IRGC UAV expert there. There was 3 Kataib Hezbollah individuals there as well, and there was a Lebanese Hezbollah individual there as well. So we are seeing that. There is Houthis have outreach to Russia. They have gone to China. They have cells in Iran. They're in Syria. They're in Lebanon as well.
Okay, thank you. Switching gears to General Langley. We've touched on in this hearing the very real nexus between our longstanding humanitarian efforts and investments in Africa to build allies, and at the same time, the very real threat China poses, particularly to naval progress, but also the extraction of those rare earth minerals that are critical to national defense. All of that related to national security and your role. Over the last 6 years, the terrorist organization JNIM has seen dramatic growth in activities. You recently gave remarks emphasizing that the U.S. was focused on helping African nations build the self-reliance to fight such terrorists, but it was reported that the vast majority of programs run through the Global Fragility Act, a multi-year initiative intended to bolster stability in vulnerable West African countries, has been shut down by this administration. Can you please speak to the threat of JNIM to the region and its stability?
Congresswoman, thanks for the question. Yes, the epicenter of JNIM right now lies within the countries of Mali and Burkina Faso and to some degree Niger. But it's threatening of the former GFA recipient states. I've met in Cote d'Ivoire with Ambassador Davis Ba, and the thing in the past, they have been able to benefit of being able to share ways ahead for counterterrorism. So in their northern regions of the southern regions of Burkina Faso, but the northern regions of Cote d'Ivoire, they've been very effective with the construct they've established. So yeah, they benefited from their whole of government, and I think the GFA had been an enabler for that in the past. But going forward, they know that with the straight talk that we have already said that we need to share this burden. And Burkina Faso we've offered them other opportunities to be able to benefit with what Cote d'Ivoire has been successful at. So it's a sharing of ideas and sharing of the enduring solution to counterterrorism, which all of those countries can benefit from.
Thank you, General. And in my remaining moments, I'm just going to make a statement about the President's recent desire, or statements and desire to develop the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East, and how deeply troubling those statements are. Many of us share the desire for a lasting two-state solution, driven by self-governance and long-term stability in the region. Yet building such a resort and displacing 2 million Palestinians will only exacerbate tensions and create a target for further hostilities in the region. I understand this isn't directly related to your responsibilities in the military, but I fail to see the national security reasoning. Instead, I want to echo, with my last moments, my colleague, Congressman Tran's excellent proposal that CENTCOM use its incredible logistics capabilities to support distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gooden.
Thank you. General Langley, I'll start with you and then move east. Regarding the DRC and Rwanda, could you give me kind of an update, not necessarily a history, but where you see things as they stand today with that conflict?
Yes, at the cusp of it, at the central piece of it is the encroachment of M23 forces into the DRC, eastern DRC. They've been very successful in their offensive operations, going all the way down to South Kivu. This encapsulates some of the regions that are rich in critical minerals. Just at the diplomatic realm, I won't speak to that piece, but I know that Rwanda is allegedly supporting M23. And then President Tshisekedi in DRC is trying to get his forces set so they can counter this. So that's all in the diplomatic realm. SADC, a number of regional constructs in Southern Africa are trying to solve this problem and trying to come to a truce where we can affect peace. Over.
Well, we would consider both countries to be friends of ours, I believe. So it's tricky in that sense. But in your mind, what needs to happen to wrap this conflict up and bring peace to the region?
From an operational perspective, like I said, this is mainly in the diplomatic realm, so I have to defer to State Department.
Fair enough. Thank you. General, could you, the last time you were here, I asked you about Qatar and our relationship with them. Some of my colleagues have questioned Qatar's reliability as a U.S. partner and their status as a major non-NATO ally. And in light of the President's recent visit, could you clarify the strategic benefits of continuing advanced military exports to Doha and our relationship with them? How's that going?
We have a phenomenal relationship, military to military, with Qatar. They house the largest base in the Middle East in Doha. They provide burden sharing in the form of $300 million a year to run those bases. They have been incredibly supportive of everything we do. Generally, the answer is yes. What is the question when I talk to them?
I find that to be the case as well. I share your belief toward that. How does what opportunities could you see for us to expand that relationship that would benefit our nation?
Sure. Just last week, we inducted for the first time a Patriot component into their depot level maintenance, and they repaired that component for us. One of the things Qatar has offered to do is to help in either manufacturing or depot level maintenance for some of the unique systems that we both share. So I think there's tremendous opportunity that can help also our industrial base as well as our maintenance base.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the work you're all doing, and good luck. Thanks so much. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today, particularly to you, General Kurilla and General Langley. I want to thank you for your incredible service to our country, and I will miss you very much as a new member on this committee, so thank you for everything you've done. General Kurilla, I want to take you back to 2022, your confirmation hearing when you testified that Iran, the Iranian regime, is the #1 destabilizing force in the Middle East. Is that still?
Still remains the #1 malign influence in the Middle East.
Thank you for that. You know, you in your written testimony, you testified that Iran's nuclear threat, its best chance at restoring deterrence and imposing its will on the region is its nuclear threat. And you also testified that Iran has virtually doubled its enrichment capacity in the past 6 months, which is extremely alarming, I think, to everybody on this committee. And I just want to say at the outset that we are committed on a bipartisan basis to taking action on this issue. I'm proud to be supporting the Enhanced Iran Sanctions Act of 2025, and we welcome the Pentagon's help in advising Congress as we think through every tool that can be used to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. I want to ask you, General, about, as many of my colleagues have, the other pillar of the threat Iran poses, its funding for terrorist groups, and particularly the Houthis. So last month, the President reached a ceasefire agreement with the Houthis, the terrorist organization, the Houthis. I wanted to ask you the goal of that ceasefire agreement and the terms of the agreement.
So when the President gave the mission to CENTCOM, it was a very specific mission. On March 10th, he said, I want the Houthis to quit shooting at our ships. That was the mission that was given to us. For 51 days, we pounded the Houthis. They were screaming to all of our partners in the region, to include the Omanis, to get the Americans to stop pounding them. And so they came and said, we will quit shooting at you if you quit shooting. We will stop shooting at you if you quit shooting at us. That met the President's goal.
So stop shooting at American ships.
That was the specific goal that was given to me.
Understood. And the goal is to restore freedom of navigation in this important part of the world where so much of global commercial shipping depends upon the freedom of navigation.
30% of all container traffic.
So has commercial shipping resumed?
So that will be more of a lagging indicator when the insurance rates come down. We just did a freedom of navigation with 4 warships over the last week. Nothing was shot at them. We also had multiple other countries' frigates, and the UK destroyer went through there. I think you will see over time, as long as the conditions exist. Deterrence is always temporal. As long as those conditions exist and the insurance rates come back down, it's a 2-week faster transit to go through the Red Sea and the Suez than to go around the Cape of Good Hope. But right now, a shipping industry is looking at it, as long as the insurance rates stay high, they will choose to go a different route. And so that's going to be a lagging indicator.
So how long do you expect it will take for commercial shipping to resume?
I think you'll see us start to escort some other U.S. flagged ships, and I think others will start to go through there as well over time, as long as the conditions exist.
Thank you, General. Well, as you know well, the cost of this lagging indicator is very real for the American people. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record an article dated June 5th. Red Sea passage remains a no-go for shipping despite U.S. action.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. General, I want to ask you about, well, first of all, so our goal was to protect American ships. Our goal was not to protect our ally Israel, and we are seeing an escalation in the conflict between the Houthis and our ally Israel. You've testified to some of the things we can do to help mitigate that threat to our ally. But I just want to say for the record that this, you have said well that this is a threat that's metastasizing. It's a regional scourge, and the United States cannot give up on this.
We are still protecting Israel, though we have THAAD battery there that is shooting down Houthi missiles, and we shoot down Houthi UAVs that are going towards Israel.
Thank you. General, I was very interested, and I'll be submitting more questions for the record, in what you said about what CENTCOM could do to help deliver humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Can you tell us what resources CENTCOM has to bear towards what I think we can all agree is a really important mission?
So I think that the biggest resources that CENTCOM can assist with is the ground lock is where you move large quantities of that. We assisted the Jordanians in scanning all of their trucks before they went in, and that met the Israeli security concerns of any trucks going in, and we delivered.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moreland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your participation today, especially what you have in front of you. And over the last 18 months from the administration and CENTCOM and AFRICOM, you've engaged and you sustained some high-tempo operations involving missile defense and rapid force protection. You contested logistics and you counter-proxy engagement, so many of which reflect the type of challenges we're anticipating in the potential Indo-Pacific conflict. So lessons learned, I'd like to hear from each of you from this kinetic operations that you've been doing, whether it be from CENTCOM's counter Houthi maritime strikes or AFRICOM's experience in the dispersed operations and low access environments. What lessons are being actively incorporated into strategic planning for high-end fight in the Indo-Pacific? Ms. Thompson, if we can start first with you, please.
Thank you, Congressman. I think it's an incredibly important question. I'll leave the operational details to General Langley and General Kurilla, but I would say one of the most important things that we're watching is certainly strategic waterways and the ability to flow forces into the Indo-Pacific. Obviously, freedom of navigation for U.S. military vessels through the BAM and the Red Sea is critical to that effort. So I would just highlight that as one of the big takeaways and one of the strategic choke points that's very important to make sure we have control over.
General, please.
Yeah, so I think between both the Iranian attacks on Israel as well as our the Houthi attacks on our naval forces, we have learned a lot that are applicable, and we pass these back to big Navy, big Air Force, the Army as well. Software is a weapon. Our ability to do combined, joint, all-domain command and control. The things that we are doing with software is amazing. We have advanced that. We have engineers every day making improvements on our ability to do that. It's a warfighting headquarters. The things that we are doing with ballistic missile defense, the software is changing based on what we are seeing on the battlefield. The same thing I would tell you as it comes to counter-UAS as well. We are making changes to the Navy software on the spy radars based on what we're seeing. It's the first time in the history of warfare that anti-ship ballistic missiles have been used against ships. I would remind you that the Truman spent 51 days in the longest sustained period of combat for an aircraft carrier since World War II, and they performed marvelously.
Thank you. General?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. And from my perspective, in an operational sense, I look at it as supporting 3 different combat commanders to include CENTCOM in their globally integrated plan against their foe, especially Iran, and then and even EUCOM in their global plan as well as INDOPACOM. And on this map here that you see the strategic choke points. As far as AFRICOM and what we're charged to do in supporting those respective combat commanders in support of their global plans is to be able to keep us at phase zero of deter. And being able to deter and keep free flow of commerce and freedom of action around us. So we work through our partners, a number of countries across the Maghreb for that end. Every exercise has that teed up as far as a objective to how we do that with shared objectives, shared intel, and common objectives, I should say, with other countries. And that's an enabler for us in my support plans to those respective combatant commanders.
Thank you, General. General Kurilla, and most of my hearings, I'm always an advocate for the Army, right, in the Indo-PACOM area especially. But today I want to advocate for the Navy's role in CENTCOM. So how has the United States participated in this multinational maritime task force to counter both state and non-state actors within your area of operation?
So I'm incredibly proud of the sailors in our Navy and what they've been able to accomplish. So when I look at CENTCOM, it has 3 of the 8 strategic choke points in the world. And what our Navy has been able to do to be able to secure those has been fantastic. I mean, they have really, when you look at what they have done both against the Houthis and in their interdiction of other things coming into the region, they've done a fantastic job.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service to the nation. I appreciate you all. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning and welcome to General Kurilla, General Langley, and Ms. Thompson. I especially want to thank the 2 generals here today for your many years of service, your dedication to our nation. Since this will be the last time that you appear before our committee, you have worn your uniform so proudly, and your country will always be grateful of that. Both sides of the aisle agree today that we must continue to improve support to service members as well as our standing around the world. But I must say that my constituents and I are still very angry that our men and women in the CENTCOM theater were put at risk by the signal mess with Secretary Hegseth, Vice President Vance, and other senior members of this administration. Our brave service members should never have to worry that our own leaders are giving enemies our mission secrets. As we've seen with the Houthis, we need to be able to properly protect ourselves from drones, and we should be outfitting our own warfighter with drones. The Rock Island Arsenal's Joint Manufacturing and Technology Center 3D prints drones that then get outfitted with the sensors and the systems needed for our important missions. And I think this is crucially needed, but to both generals today. Can you talk about where we need to be going in terms of both our unmanned air systems and counter-UAS capabilities in our regions?
If I could just jump on the additive manufacturing 3D printing. So we have an innovation task force out there. One of them is Task Force 39, which has an additive manufacturing in Kuwait. We use that for both polymers and metallic additive manufacturing. We'll print parts, get that back to get a system back up until that OEM part can come in. We do that on a routine basis. We are 3D printing drones down in Task Force 99 down in Qatar. And they do with these small attritable drones. We slap some cameras on them, and we use those very effectively as well. So I think this is, when you talk counter-UAS, though, a big part of it is the detect. And I think we have to do a better job to be able to detect, and that is something that we've made some recommendations on as well.
General Langley.
Now I'll just go ahead and state that my buddy here, Kurilla, in CENTCOM region has been a lead as far as evolving technology to counter drones, because what happens in CENTCOM will eventually happen in AFRICOM. So we've been following his lead in the technology and experimentation, and we've been leveraging that within the AFRICOM region.
Thank you, sir. The new regime in Syria certainly changes the landscape of the Middle East. I'm hopeful that this will really diminish Iran's influence in the region and lessen Russia's foothold in the Middle East. To General Kurilla, with our approach to Syria changing, where do you see things headed today, and what opportunities and challenges do you see going forward?
So the opportunities are significant. I think I see a lot of upside. I see little downside for engaging right now. Ambassador Tom Bark, he's the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, but also the special envoy to Syria. I talk to him often. He is at the table. I think we waited a little too long to come to the table with the fall of Assad back in December. We're now there, and we're able to engage and be able to shape the way forward. I think that's a very, very positive thing.
One of the things that I worry about with the current administration is how we're handling the relationships that we have with our allies around the world, our ability to forge new partnerships and friendships. Building and maintaining these partnerships is so crucial to our own safety and our interests. And as General Kurilla mentioned in your written statement, we can't take our partners for granted. Can you speak to the importance of our allies in the region and what we in Congress need to do to support them?
Well, I think a big part of it is being there for them. I've been to the region 45 times. You have to be there. You have to sit down. You have a meal together, and that's how you build a friendship and a relationship. I talk to the Chads almost every single day. I'm talking to a different Chad, multiple chiefs of defense. I'm sorry. Yeah. Every single day, I'm talking to several of them. When they're sending you pictures of their grandkids, you know you're part of the family. And to be able to do that, though, what they're asking of us is, hey, one, are you going to be there for us? And the answer is yes. But it's the foreign military sales is their single biggest frustration that they have on the time to deliver. They have the means to purchase. It's the time to deliver that equipment that they're asking for. And that's where I think we can, I'm 40% of all foreign military sales in the world in the CENTCOM region, and I think we can do a better job.
Thank you, gentlemen, both for your service, and we appreciate your dedication to our country. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for coming today, and I'd like to thank everyone in uniform today, as well as our veterans that are in the room. General Kurilla, you talked about ISIS-K in Afghanistan in your opening statement. I'd like a little deep dive, if you don't mind.
Sure. All right, so ISIS Khorasan, perhaps one of the most active in trying to do external plots globally, to include against the homeland. Right now, what we saw is the Taliban, in going after ISIS-K, they hate each other, pushed a lot of them into the tribal areas on the Afghan-Pakistan border. Through a phenomenal partnership with Pakistan, they have gone after ISIS Khorasan, killing dozens of them. Through a relationship we have with them, providing intelligence, they have captured at least 5 ISIS Khorasan high-value individuals. They extradited back Jafar, who was one of the key individuals behind the Abbey Gate bombing. And the first person he called, Chief of the Army Staff Munir, was me, and said, I've caught him, I'm willing to extradite him back to the United States. Please tell the Secretary of Defense and the President. So we are seeing Pakistan, with limited intelligence that we're providing them, go after them using their means to do that. And we're seeing an effect on ISIS Khorasan. At the same point, they are continuing to move around. Sometimes they'll try and go back into Afghanistan. We have the means to be able to collect, but for the most part right now, they're hanging out right in that border area of Pakistan. And I would also tell you that, since 2024, the beginning, Pakistan had over 1,000 terrorist attacks in the western area, killing about 700 security and civilians and 2,500 wounded. They're in an active counterterrorism fight right now, and they have been a phenomenal partner in the counterterrorism world.
Does it seem like they're scaling down or scaling up?
So I think from ISIS Khorasan, they got hit very, very hard over the last several months. And so I would tell you right now, they're at a low point right now. What we're getting out of interrogation and exploitation has been significant. But remember, these are the same individuals that did the Crocus Music City Hall attack in Moscow. They did the attack in Kerman, Iran, and they've attempted other attacks, and there is actually ties in a classified setting that I could talk in terms of the homeland.
Whatever we have to do not to go back to that place would be amazing.
That's why we need to, if I could.
Yes,
Congress,
please.
We have to have a relationship with Pakistan and with India. I do not believe it is a binary switch, that we can't have one with Pakistan if we have a relationship with India. We should look at the merits of the relationship for the positives that it has.
General Langley, in regards to AFRICOM, it seems as if Russia more or less has Africa landlocked. Well, I'm looking at the map here. Can you give me a kind of a high-level briefing when it comes to Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, the northern part of Africa? If you roll the clock back maybe a decade, that seems to be the best place you could hide in plain sight, especially in the northern point of Tunisia, with the vastness of the desert. Are we seeing anything happening, developing in the northern part of Africa? Because it seems as if we are centrally kind of focused on where all the rare earth minerals are being mined.
Congressman, that's a great question. And I've always been, through my tenure of command, the last 3 years, engaging with all these countries to the degree as we look at this is NATO's southern flank. And I see those strategic choke points on there. We need freedom of navigation or freedom of action for our ships in support of those war plans for NATO and for EUCOM. So I've been working overtime and engaging with these countries. Morocco's doing their part, and even Algeria, which in some realms that we disagree on some things, but Algeria, we were able to sign a non-binding agreement in cooperation. But I will tell you that Russia is still there. They're still trying to effect an agreement on their own so they can get basing access or port access. And as you even go down into Libya, I met with Field Marshal Haftar almost two times, engaging them to ensure that we can work with them because we have shared threats, especially along their southern borders of terrorism. Just engaging with both sides, trying to get collective agreement in Libya between the GNU and the LNA. That is essential that we keep U.S. diplomatic agreements and cooperation with these countries because we see what Russia's trying to do, establish some ports across the Mediterranean, warm water ports, so that it'll affect their operations, try to get a decisive advantage. But we're not going to let that happen in phase zero coherency operations that we do in AFRICOM.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson, I have nothing for you today. Keep up the great work. I yield back, sir.
You got it easy today from him. All right, we now have Mr. Cisneros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Kurilla and General Langley. Thank you both for your years of service and dedication to our country as you both get ready to retire here in a while. But General Langley, when I was in the Navy, my ship, the USS Ogden, stopped in Eritrea, which was at that time a new independent nation. We went there to show the flag, but to show a support for this new country and really to the region as well. But that's not the impression I'm getting from the current administration. They're pulling away foreign aid, ships aren't visiting the continent like they used to. We're leaving a void for Russia and for the PRC to fill. And you've been quoted as saying that the PRC is replicating what we have done in Africa, targeting the International Military Education and Training Program that they also said they're going to increase security and training in a number of countries. In April, it was reported that Cairo and the PRC were planning to participate in a joint exercise between their air forces. As the administration continues to pull back and the PRC continues to build relations, what, in your opinion, is the national security risk and impact to Africa as well as to us here at home?
I'd say the CCP is trying to replicate what we do, what we've done in the past, and have a strategic advantage, and especially engaging with our African partners. Because they want to be able to establish an enabler to close the decisive gap that we've had over them for years. I'll just go into maritime sense, especially with their NETF, which is their Naval Expeditionary Task Force. They go around the periphery of the African continent, engaging with a number of countries. We need to be able to get that. You brought up your naval background. You know, when we had the ARG Muse, we're not heel to toe anymore. We're not 3.0. We do need the amphibious readiness group and the Marine expeditionary units out there on ships. That is a force multiplier for crisis response or any other show of deterrence. I'd say, you know, that's not. That doesn't go across political lines. That goes in operational lines. You know, Navy, as I met with the Vice Admiral in their operation sense, but also met with Admiral Kilby and also Stuart Munch, and they are bringing up the capability to try to provide Africa with that capability so that we can compete with China, especially in the maritime sense. So I would say that one step in the right direction is getting those ARG Muse back out there and in the AFRICOM theater.
All right, Gator Navy, all the way. Ms. Thompson, you said in your opening remarks that the department is working with African nations to grow, working with them to increase operational independence for these African nations. But I think really what we're seeing, right, is they're not doing that. They're moving towards the PRC. As you know, as I referenced here, Egypt and the PRC kind of talking about doing joint operations. How does the department not see this as a red flag? Why aren't we doing something about this? Why are we pulling away and we're just pushing them in the direction of our, you know, of our pacing threat here?
Sir, thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. And I would point you first to our interim national defense strategic guidance. Our top two priorities are defense of the homeland, countering terrorist threats that have the capability and intent to strike the homeland, and then deterrence of the PRC, particularly in the Western Pacific. But obviously, as you outlined absolutely correctly, that bleeds over to the African continent as well. And so I would say from our Title X security assistance approach to the continent, but then also as we're in the development process for our national defense strategy, this is something that is top of mind, and this is certainly not an area where we're pulling back. We want to be very targeted and strategic in our approach to make sure that we are deterring the PRCs, particularly their ability to have a military advantage on the continent. So I would share your assessment on that front.
Well, please take that back to the heads over there, right? As we continue to pull away, they are continuing to build relationships with China and the PRC. And, you know, PRC is more than happy to fill that void as we pull away. And this should be a red flag that they are working with these things, and that is something that needs to be brought up and considered. And with that, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Kurilla, General Langley, it has been a pleasure working with you. I wish you fair winds and following seas in your next endeavors. I'm sure you'll be highly successful. We'll miss you. I consider you friends, and if any time you ever want to share a beverage or a box of crayons, just let me know. We'll always be available. General Langley, I'll start with you. The Djibouti Air Base Cluster is within striking distance of some of the Houthi weapons, and I was wondering, especially with the development of drones that have been developed in Iran and put together in Yemen, what are we doing for countermeasures, and do you think we could do better? How can we assist you in equipping our bases with countermeasures for those advanced drones and what they're trying to develop?
Congressman, it's an evolving threat, especially with the Houthis on the other side of the Red Sea. And I will get into the specifics of what we actually need to improve upon, enhance upon. We're protected now, but I will get into specifics in closed session of things that I think that we can continue to enhance and evolve in that, because it's not just Djibouti; it's all the way down to Manda Bay in Kenya. So I will say that it is evolving. The Houthis are gaining in capability. And then there's other illicit actors in the region that can be a threat within East Africa writ large.
Would you say that it's safe to assume that we have a ways to go to be secure in our endeavors?
We will always do position improvement. You know, our fighting holes always need to be improved for force protection. That's my #1 mission, is protecting the troops on the ground.
And in regards to CENTCOM, we've seen everything from Tower 22 to the ship lanes really kind of being a proving ground for drone attacks and missile attacks. And I'm sure we're going to eventually encounter supersonic missiles and other things that are very, very alarming. What have you learned from those sort of contacts as we advance our technologies and we have these new technologies to deal with?
You have, Congressman, you have to have a layered defense is the first thing, and you have to continue to improve upon your capabilities and evolve faster and move faster than the enemy can on theirs. Look at what happened in Russia with the Ukraine, when you watched also them go to fiber optic drones because of the EW and the jamming that was up there. So they're moving very, very quickly in terms of advancements. We have to move faster.
Yeah, I just talked to an AI community about that very same thing, closing the kill chain, making sure that our next technologies, I mean, fly-by-wire is awesome, but it's kind of like a look back at the tow technology. I want to look forward and look at new terrain models, how we're going to do that. What's your feeling, and this is an associated question that I just came up on just as we're talking, if we're going to have different navigation systems that aren't going to be controlled by semi-autonomous controllers, autonomous weapon systems that literally identify targets without any input once they're launched.
They exist right now.
The question is, would that be a good, I get a little bit squeamish when we talk about autonomous weapon systems that direct themselves and they don't have that final.
I think those exist right now. They don't. I know they exist right now. It's when you get into that final mile, that final kilometer that then locks on a target. That's an autonomous target recognition system that has then taken it in and you can't jam it, et cetera.
Yeah, good point, good point. One of the other things I thought was really interesting is there's USAID and other things that we do in foreign investments we do that now have come into question. Now, some of it's been wasteful, but obviously I'm not against foreign aid because it gives us real influence and really creates stability in different regions. Where do you think we could redirect those funds that have maybe been not spent on the most efficient systems? This is for both of you, and I know we only have 45 seconds left, but where can we best spend the money we do to influence and create stability in those regions that we're talking about right now?
Well, I think from a USAID, State Department is now taking on that responsibility. For us, there are certain countries that absolutely don't have the natural resources, and those are things that we need to look at. And I can get specific with you, and if you have a written question, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Phase 4 operations stability. I've seen it work in Somalia. You know, as they were going through lower and middle Shabelle from 2022 heretofore. But without that and recreating that and or getting it from other countries, that there's going to be a lapse in completing a credible force to do the hold.
My best to you both, gentlemen. Loved working with you. Semper Fi.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will echo all of my colleagues' thanks to both of you for your many decades of service. I've very much enjoyed working with all of you, and General Kurilla, as predicted, I outlasted you. General Langley, I first want to discuss our strategy in Somalia. Under your leadership, the United States has rapidly increased the pace of airstrikes against both al-Shabaab and ISIS Somalia. In the past 5 months alone, the U.S. has conducted 37 strikes compared to just 4 during the entire first year of the Biden administration. That's actually nearly as many as President Trump authorized in his first year, which totaled 39. So could you first tell me what is the objective of these airstrikes?
Congresswoman, this is one of the number one objectives of Secretary Hegseth came in when he became the Secretary of Defense. He said AFRICOM needs to do counterterrorism operations to protect the homeland. Up there in the Golis Mountains, you have ISIS Somalia. They have the propensity to affect the homeland, whether it be global financing. We had to stop that. You know, we did have an operation back in 2023, but ISIS Somalia has grown. As a matter of fact, the emir is there now. They've only increased their capability and capacity. That's why we had to turn up the heat on putting pressure through lethal means to be able to attract that.
I understand the threat. I guess what I'm concerned about is that we've been using this same logic for decades, It doesn't seem like it's attached to any ability for us to eventually leave. And we saw that, for instance, in 2019, when there was expanded airstrikes, that it didn't actually translate to fewer al-Shabaab attacks in Somalia. So are these airstrikes part of a coherent, articulated strategy aimed at enabling long-term stability and ultimately drawing down the U.S. military footprint?
Yes, that's our operational intent right now, to be able to cease or deter their ability for ex-ops to protect the homeland.
Okay, that's different than there being an actual strategy. Ms. Thompson, you said Somalia is an incredible success. I think I would disagree with your assessment of that. Is there a whole of government, coherent, articulated strategy aimed at enabling long-term stability and ultimately drawing down the U.S. military footprint in Somalia?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I would highlight my commentary was meant to associate with the INDSG guidance. Our number one objective is obviously to deter and deny and degrade credible ex-ops threats to the homeland. As I've highlighted, and as you highlighted in your opening comments, the significant uptick in strikes is demonstrative of basically attaching those activities to our number one INDSG objective. So I would articulate that is where the connection to the strategy is. In terms of force posture in Somalia on a long-term basis, this is something that obviously we would contemplate as part of the broader global force posture review, and no decisions for AFRICOM or for anywhere else have been made at this time, but it's certainly something that would factor into the strategy.
None of this
there.
sounds like an actual strategy to create stability in Somalia, so I will look forward to following up with you both on that. General Kurilla, I'd like to turn to you now on Yemen. Civil society and media organizations have reported numerous civilian casualties caused by recent U.S. operations in Yemen, many as a result of the use of heavy explosive weapons in populated areas. For example, the U.S. strikes on Ras Isa port in Hodeidah on April 17th reportedly killed at least 84 civilians. So one, did CENTCOM foresee the level of civilian harm reported, and what steps did CENTCOM take to mitigate the risks of civilian harm during the conduct of recent strikes in Yemen?
So any civilian death is a tragedy. What we have is a civilian harm mitigation team that investigates every single one of these to determine if they're credible. There are still several that are under investigation. You mentioned Ras Isa. There were several things that we did to mitigate that prior, to include heavy ISR soaking of that prior to that. We did messaging to the individuals there. We did messaging to the ships. We ensured the weaponry and the mitigation of those systems. Now, the problem is you have a fuel port that is being hit. We did not target the trucks that were in the port at that same time. But again, that's under investigation to determine the actual numbers. And again, I would argue that this is the Houthi casualty numbers as well.
And can you commit today on behalf of CENTCOM to publish your findings on civilian casualties in Yemen?
We push all of that up and, to the OSD, and they end up pushing those out.
Okay, so you will publish
Absolutely.
them. Excellent. Thank you so much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes this gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Thompson, thank you for being here. Generals Kurilla and Langley, thank you for being here and for your service. I want to start by asking you the same question I've asked every combatant commander that has come before HASS this year. In your opinion, has the space-based threat from China and Russia in your theater improved or worsened in the last 5 years?
From a CENTCOM perspective, Russia has actually gone down because they're no longer really in the region where they were basing some of their space-based threats. China has probably increased, but I would tell you Iran has significantly increased.
So overall increased, you would say? Yeah. General Langley?
On the continent of Africa, there's an increase, especially down in Namibia, dual use, state-sponsored type space-enabling capabilities by the CCP.
Yeah, and obviously we're in an open setting here, but can you provide maybe a brief description of how this threat affects your operations, General Kurilla?
I would be happy to do that in a closed session.
Okay, sounds good. General, same? Okay.
Yes, in a closed session.
Okay, thank you. On another topic, I'm concerned about the nuclear threat from Iran and reports that they rejected the latest proposal for a new nuclear deal from the U.S. And it seems like Iran is hell-bent on having nuclear weapons, which would be a direct threat to the existence of Israel. General Kurilla, in your written testimony, you say, quote, a nuclear-armed Iran would change the Middle East overnight and forever, potentially setting off a regional arms race with catastrophic consequences, unquote. Can you expand on this? What would a Middle East with a nuclear Iran look like?
I think you would see other countries in the region doing everything they could to obtain a nuclear weapon, either development or through purchase, to be able to gain one, to be able to retain deterrence back with Iran.
And how can CENTCOM deter Iran from proceeding with their nuclear development program? How can they strengthen the president's hand at the negotiating
I
table?
provide a range of options to the president, but I am in all favor of having a negotiated settlement that prevents Iran from getting a nuclear weapon because of the consequences of conflict.
Okay. And then, General Kurilla, what lessons can the U.S. learn from Iron Dome that could be applied to the development of Golden Dome? Do you believe deterrence by denial to be an effective strategy?
It can be, but I would tell you some of the biggest lessons learned is how Israel's defense industrial base works. You cannot even sell a system to the Israeli military, the IDF, that is not open architecture, that will not work with the rest of their systems, so you don't end up with a proprietary system that's standalone. We need systems that can integrate and all talk to each other.
And so Golden Dome should
That would
take
be my
note of that.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, General. Ms. Thompson, how does our partnership with Jordan advance peace and stability in the Middle East?
Thank you for the question, sir. I think Jordan, in particular, and our partnership with the Jordanian Armed Forces, not only goes to promote greater burden sharing throughout the region to include countering shared threats that we have, particularly on the terrorism front, but then also weapons and narcotics smuggling and interdiction. They're a really great partner on that. And then UAS and ballistic missile interdiction as well. And I'm sure General Kurilla can provide some more operational specifics, but those are the main pillars of the security relationship that we have with the Jordanians.
General?
They're one of our strongest partners. They're the country I have visited the most when I go to the Middle East.
Okay. Is there any more that the department could do to support Jordanian armed forces?
I think there are things that we can do to strong point Jordan in the counter-UAS. Counter-UAS in Jordan defends both Jordan, U.S. forces, and Israel.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Thompson, after years of neglect by President Biden, President Trump is right to prioritize our Gulf partners. How did his recent visit to the region advance U.S. national security interests?
Thank you for the question, sir. And I would just highlight particularly the deepening of defense partnerships that we have. Not only, I mean, as General Kurilla has highlighted, obviously we have a long way to go on working through the kinks in our FMS process and defense industrial base, but deepening those partnerships to enable greater allied burden sharing, but then also interoperability and empowerment of our Gulf partners to take on more of the responsibility in the region, particularly given normalized relations with Israel for a fair few of them, is a massive step in the right direction for the posture we want to have in the region. And then I would also just highlight the commercial success as well. That's coupled with the defense success, and I think both per President Trump's comments and Riyadh really echo that sentiment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. I do want to make the announcement that we will be concluding the open session at 12:30 and going into classified session a few minutes thereafter because votes are going to be called on the House floor at 1:30. So with that, the chair and I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Ryan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to my colleague from Pennsylvania. I think I got here after you. Thank you all for being here. Especially given that it's both of your last hearings, Generals Kurilla and Langley. Just want to, that's an appropriate fist bump. Just want to commend and thank you both, as I know many of my colleagues have, but cannot be said enough. Appreciate it. And General Kurilla, in particular, I want to commend you. I don't think I know you're a humble, quiet professional, but I think in particular, what you did in defense of Israel, in defense of the region, in defense of the U.S., most importantly, in your leadership on two unprecedented direct attacks, as you said in your opening testimony, that have never occurred in the history of either Iran or Israel. Your leadership in preparing and executing that defense was exceptional, and I think we all have a lot to learn on a bunch of levels from that, but I just wanted to say that publicly here today. Ms. Thompson, appreciate you being here again. I know the last time you were here, I was a little frustrated that we weren't getting really many answers from you. Hopefully we can get some more answers. My line of questioning is similar to what I asked you last time. I know it's been hit on by colleagues, but I want to come back on it again. I want to bring in what General Kurilla said in his opening very powerfully in speaking about both the risks and the tectonic shift, but also the opportunity vis-a-vis Iran on its heels or arguably knees, and our ability and opportunity to press in that moment. And I'm trying to just wrestle with the dissonance between that and some of the both appointees of this administration and some of the rhetoric of this administration, not so much you today in your testimony specifically, but I've pointed this out before. The DASD for the Middle East, Mr. Domino, has said deeply concerning things, including that the Middle East does, quote, not really matter for U.S. interests, that, quote, vital or existential threats in the Middle East are, quote, best characterized as minimal to non-existent. He's also specifically characterized Iran's missile attacks on Israel as, quote, fairly moderate. I think General Kurilla, I'm not going to put you on the spot, might disagree with that. He's vocally opposed attacking Iran's nuclear program and described U.S. strikes against the Houthis as, quote, futile. Can you just explain to us, I mean, I agree with what I've heard from General Kurilla and other experienced military leaders. We need to press the advantage we have vis-a-vis Iran and their proxies. How are we supposed to do that when senior appointees in the Pentagon are saying things like that?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. First and foremost, I will just note that I was not involved in the hiring of any officials in the administration or the political.
But you are here to speak on its behalf.
So what
right?
I would say from the ISA perspective within the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, I will make very clear we support the president's objective to not only first and foremost defend the state of Israel, but second, of course, deny Iran the ability to obtain a nuclear weapon. That is something we are 100% committed to. And I will also note that we support the president's objective and stand ready to provide military options should his strategy of pursuing peace with Iran through a negotiated solution and denying Iran a nuclear weapon through a negotiated solution. We stand ready as a department and within OSD policy to provide the Secretary.
I'm sorry,
and the
but
President
how are
those
you
options.
ready if you're not in agreement? I mean,
I can only speak.
Should Mr. Domino be in the position then if he's not aligned with the president's intent?
That's not something that I can specifically speak to, but I can speak to for the international security, role that I play in the Department of Defense. This is what we are committed to. Working under Undersecretary Colby, we are very much in line with Secretary Hegseth and President Trump's guidance on this, and none of that has changed.
Might this dissonance explain, for example, why in the recent back and forth about the negotiations, which we all agree we want to happen, there's lack of clarity on level of enrichment that might be allowed within the administration, signaling division and weakness to our adversaries?
So that's not something I can speak to. That's something that would be a question for Ambassador Witkoff's team at the State Department, because they are the lead for negotiations.
And Ms. Thompson, I'll interrupt you again. I respect you. I know you have a hard job, and I know you're performing the duties of, if I'm saying that right, yes, performing the duties of.
Correct.
But can the administration send us someone that can speak to these? These are pretty important questions. Can we get somebody that can speak to these?
I would very much like to come and do a broad Iran briefing for you all, if that would be something that's helpful. But I would respectfully ask that the State Department be present for that as well, because Ambassador Witkoff's team, as the lead for negotiations, really would have the most color
Gentleman's
to add to
time's
that.
expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from South Carolina, Ms. Mace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Iran's reckless behavior continues to threaten U.S. forces, our allies, and regional stability. Its support for Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis and other dangerous proxy groups continue to sow chaos throughout the Middle East, as I know you all are very familiar. Its support for proxy militias and terrorists threatens our interests and those of our allies, while it advances in ballistic missile technology and pursuit of nuclear weapons threaten to plunge the region into greater turmoil. CENTCOM's presence in the region deters aggression against our personnel and Middle Eastern allies. We must impose real costs on the Ayatollahs and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to ensure that deterrence is fully restored and Iran ceases its destructive activities. We must also send a clear message. Any advance toward Iran acquiring nuclear weapons is unacceptable to the United States. I commend President Trump's efforts to ensure Iran's nuclear program is fully dismantled. Nothing short of full dismantlement of their nuclear capabilities will ensure peace and stability in the region. So the Iranian regime has mastered the art of wielding proxy groups against its adversaries in the region repeatedly. From Hamas barbarism to Hezbollah's arsenals in Lebanon and the Houthi strikes in the Red Sea, Iran leverages its surrogates to strike our allies and harm our interests. So my first question today for General Kurilla, can you briefly discuss the threat landscape you see from Iran, including the use of proxies?
So Iran basically has three pillars that they use. The first one is long-range weapons and anti-access aerial denial. So think long-range missiles, UAVs. The second is their proxy networks. The number one proxy they had was Lebanese Hezbollah, which acted as a bit of a sword of Damocles over the top of Israel. Israel's, the doctrinal term, disintegration of Lebanese Hezbollah should be studied by every military.
I was recently there and saw that destruction, and they did a very successful work.
It was brilliant. What they have done to Hamas. The Houthis were one that not a lot of people thought about before, because at one point it was the lowest priority for intelligence. I think it is something that we have to pay a lot of attention to. I think what you're seeing with the Iranian-aligned militia groups inside of Iraq, they used to be inside of Syria with the fall of Assad, that basically severed the Shia crescent. Qasem Soleimani, who we killed back in 2020, he wanted to have this Shia crescent that ran from Iran to Iraq, Syria to Lebanon. The fall of Assad severed that. That is probably the single biggest event that has happened in the Middle East.
And what's changed since October 7th?
I think what's changed since October 7th is Israel feels they're an existential threat for their very existence with a lot of these Iranian proxies that are attacking them. And we had the first state-on-state attacks, blows between the two countries. Iran is a weaker strategic position. They've lost a lot of their proxies. Their air defense network is not what it used to be. However, they still have a lot of operational capability in terms of their long-range weapons. At the classified session, I can talk in great detail their capabilities.
Do you have any concern about the Houthis and their relationship with Saudi Arabia?
The relationship with Saudi Arabia, no, I don't have. I mean, Saudi Arabia has been a strong supporter of what we were doing in Operation.
Yes, they have. But my understanding is we designate the Houthis, for example, as not the top tier terrorist organization. They're on the lower rung of designation. Is that correct?
They were, ma'am. They were firstly a specially designated terrorist group, and then we made them a foreign terrorist organization under President Trump. So they are at the top levels.
They're at the top level now, which is something I advocated for when Biden was president, and it didn't happen, which means there are consequences to that in the Middle East, which is good for the United States and our allies overseas. Has the degradation of Iran's proxy network affected its ability to destabilize the region?
So the one challenge we have with Iran, they get petrodollars.
Okay.
90%, 85 to 90% of their oil is purchased by China. So China is effectively supporting and financing Iran's malign behavior. We still see the amount of funds that are going to the IRGC Quds Force, that is who runs the proxy networks outside of Iran. So as we look at the sanctioned oil, I think for the first time, the State Department sanctioned what are called the teapot refineries. These are refineries along the Chinese coast that these ships take this sanctioned oil. Iran, this is 10% of all Chinese oil they get. They import 70%, 50% goes to the Strait of Hormuz, but it's 85 to 90% from Iran. It goes into these teapot refineries, and I think the first time we've ever done is we've sanctioned one of those teapot refineries.
Last question, thoughts on Qatar?
We have a very strong relationship, military to military. Largest base there, they fund the base, they do burden sharing. When I ask them a question, they say the answer is yes. What is the question?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's what you get for being late to the gavel. I really appreciate your service, General. In general, thank you so much for your amazing careers and for the opportunity to speak with you. Most questions have been asked, so I'm going to ask the one that I have that hasn't yet been asked. General Langley, you spoke a lot about what's going on in Africa and the fact that you've had a conversation with our partners and allies and that they understand and are embracing, in your, I think, words, their new roles and responsibilities. I'd like to I'd like to believe that. And so let's say that that's true, because I hear that a lot from all of Europe as well, about Europe and Ukraine. Assuming that is true, can you describe how AFRICOM is operationalizing that process of transitioning the responsibilities and roles over to our allies and to our partners? And can you also explain, and this is for both of you all, how you would measure, or what sort of metrics or benchmarks you would have to know whether or not our partners are indeed transitioning and are really truly prepared to be able to take on this sort of operational responsibility? That's my only question, so I'd love it if you would give it some real thought, because it's really, really important that if we assume that these folks can or are interested in doing this, that we have performance metrics or standards that we're looking for, and that we also have an operational plan that we have to transition those responsibilities over.
Congresswoman, I'm grateful for the question. I know we last spoke when we were at Munich Security Conference, and we were in the throes of the Title 22 pause, and then at the forefront of the Title 10 review. So at AFRICOM, what we had to do is reassess where we were and try to do some predictive analytics on what the effects would be. This is all in parallel with structuring our narrative, of going to our partners, going to our allies, and come up with straight talk of what it really means of a shared burden for the sake of stability and security on the continent of Africa. So I did. Further, I did meet with the NATO rep for the southern neighborhood, as they call it SNAP, and shared that with him. I said, our government, we are all in for stability and security across Africa, but we need a shared commitment from you, because this is your southern neighborhood. What happens as far as mass migration or a migration of terrorists that can threaten your neighborhood, your borders, is our same concern with our southwest border. So that soaked in well. With our African partners, a shared commitment. They said, well, it's going to take a little time, and also we're going to diversify our partner. So we get that, as long as we have those shared objectives, as long as we have those shared values to reach that end state. So in Nairobi last week, I collectively got with the chiefs of defense and said, hey, their biggest message to me, hey, we're not looking to be saved. We can hit stability.
What does that look like? And when you're talking about, a narrative, narratives don't get it done. What is the plan? What is the operational plan that we all have collectively on our responsibility to hand that over, and on our ability to measure whether it's actually been handed over with any sort of security or safety or assurance that it will be consistent to the standards that we have always put to the region?
And Congresswoman, I'll just tell you, the plan is theirs. Every country is different. We don't push ourselves to invade on their sovereignty. Every country is coming up with their own plan. That was their takeaway. But they also know that that the militaries, all these military leads, know that they're giving their best military advice for the enduring solution from their layered threats. One of them that's a shared threat of ours is terrorism. So therein lies their ability and their responsibility to come up with their own plans. I'm seeing it different from coast to West Africa all the way to Somalia. They all have a different approach. I have to respect that. And how we can, then we decide, then we go through our Title 10 review, and we double down based on the empirical data, what has worked in the past and what didn't work.
But how do you weave those strategies together, or do you just walk away and say everybody's got their own plan, and it looks like a bunch of Democrats, we're all going to have a different plan? You don't want that. You want people to figure out how to work together, and us walking away from this is irresponsible unless we feel as though we're walking away with a plan that's unified and not just individual sovereignty. Am I making sense?
Gentleman's time expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us. Ms. Thompson, General Kurilla, General Langley, thank you so much for your service. Thanks for all you've done for our nation. I want to try to maybe draw a line amongst a number of different issues that you all are dealing with. I really think that the combatant commands being there on the front lines probably have the best assessment and understanding of the threat and the timeliness of the threat. and then how that needs to be expressed and the assets that we need in order to counter that threat. I mean, we see our exquisite assets, the ones you have in theater, General Carrillo, General Langley. You see where we pull the Carl Vincent from the East China Sea. We extended the deployment of the Harry Truman. General Langley, you know that when we had needs there in Africa, whether it's places like Sudan, Morocco, even some of the other events there in the Red Sea, we see the demand signal go up, and then when we'd like to have a crisis response team in an ARGMU, we don't have it, or we have to move other assets around. General Carrillo, you spoke at length about the building threat from one-way attack drones, and all you have to do is to look at the aerial photographs of the runways there in Russia and ask the Russians about the impact of one-way attack drones and give the Ukrainians credit. But the thing that concerns me is that's a scenario that can play in the opposite direction today and tomorrow. And I just don't believe we have the counter-UAS capability that we need. I want your perspective, because I think the COCOMs are closest to the threat. And if you were tomorrow to say, these are the things that I need that I can operationalize quickly. Well, I love our exquisite platforms, and we need them. But they're not coming quickly, and they're not coming inexpensively. But there are lots of opportunities with expendables and attritables. Give me your perspective. If you could give us on your UFOR list, if you could say today, my top priorities on the UFOR list, the way you see the threat as it is today, both of you, what would be your top 5 priorities to make sure this nation gives you at least a part of the tool set that you need, part of the kit that you would need to counter what you see and how it changes on a daily basis?
So the greatest risk, Congressman, in the CENTCOM AOR is the unmanned aerial systems and ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
So it would be in the detect and kill of counter-UAS to include swarms, large numbers. You need magazine depth. And then in terms of our air defense assets that are forward deployed, you have to be able to protect those from counter-UAS as well. We need to be very mobile. We need to be able to integrate them into the systems. When I took over 3 years ago, if I walked into a base defense operations center, that's where they do all the command and control for the base to be able to defend against drones, you'd see 5 systems, 5 screens, 5 operators.
Yeah.
Now when you walk in, we've been able to integrate that into maybe 2 screens and 2 operators, but you have now 7 systems integrated into there. So we need to really do better at the detect. We're only going to see the systems get smaller, more lethal. Electronic magnetic information, the electromagnetic spectrum, when we try and jam them, that's why the Ukraine and Russia went to fiber optics, going out to 40 kilometers with fiber optic drones. Yeah. You can't jam that. So those are the things I would ask right now is the counter-UAS detect. I think we need to put aerial AESA radars for low radar cross-section to be able to pick up, elevated, and then ballistic missile defense.
Very good. General Langley?
Ballistic missile defense.
Yep. Yes, thank you.
I think my top 3 is about the same as Eric Carrillo's counter-UAS, integrated air missile defense. And but I was going to add, sense to make sense, ISR. I'm at a deficit for ISR across the continent, emanating threats. Match capabilities to the threats. That's what Secretary Hayes told me to do, and that's what I'm requesting. But just go further down the list. Maritime capability. Like I said, I've said it already, but I'm just going to go ahead and bang the drum. We missed the ARGMU. Yeah. We missed the amphibious readiness group. The Marine Expeditionary Units, they're ready, but they're sitting on the they're sitting on the shore. But we need to fix the ship problem. As far as that 3-ship ARG is what's needed. We can't do heel to toe anymore. Sometimes we're not even 1.0. We need to get back there. I talked to the Vice CNO the other day, and he gets it, as well as I talked to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. We missed that in the AFRICOM AOR, from crisis response, and we need that sea-based forward. You're right, Congressman. We really did need that when Hamedi was going at it with Burhan in Sudan. We really needed that offshore to utilize that. So, and then also for a force deterrent, it's a show of power to contend with the net up that the Chinese is going around the periphery of the continent.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You back.
Gentleman's time expired. This will conclude the open portion of our hearing. We will reconvene in 10 minutes at 12:40 in room 2212 for the classified portion.